Almost, I'm sorry.
That's all right.
Just
Yep.
gonna- You'll use my slide advance. And John and Nora, you broke the fashion code today.
John's in there.
No, it's the three of us. Picture.
So Greg, may I do just a couple minutes of introduction?
Sure.
Ready to go? All right. Thank you and welcome to this, the fifth presentation in our Sustainability Research and Practice Seminar. My name is Bradley Flam. I'm the Director of the Office of Sustainability. And we are very happy to be co-sponsoring this series with our colleagues in the Office for Research and Sponsored Programs and the Sustainability Council's Scholarly and Creative Activities Committee. For those of you on Zoom, you can find a copy of this program for all of the presentations, all 12 of them this semester, online on our Office of Sustainability homepage. Down towards the bottom. For those of you who are here in person, we have a couple of copies up at the front, and you're welcome to take one and put it on your office door or share it with a friend or colleague. For now, I'm going to stop talking and ask all of you to please join me in welcoming today's speaker, Professor Greg Turner.
Thank you for the nice clap of welcome. I think, long overdue doing one of these. I've been asked before, and I finally got a chance to do it. So I appreciate, again, the invitation. And lichens, I'm going to speak about a few aspects of them. I don't know how many of you have a fairly good understanding of what lichens are, may even know some of the characteristics of them. My suspicion is, being some biology background people here, or natural history people, most of you know they are. But for those of you who do not, online or not, I'm going to start with some biology. I'm going to just briefly talk about big picture generalized ecosystem services, which clearly relates to sustainability in many ways, certainly environmental sustainability, ecosystem sustainability, biodiversity, et cetera. And then I'm going to just touch on some work, a couple mainly a grad student, April Wallace, who's now at the University of Nevada, getting her PhD, and I scared her off. She's now doing non-lichen research, but she at least, got to know lichens a bit. It is still February, so do you notice this this nice heart-shaped Saxicillus lichen growing on a rock? And this is actually Victoria Morera, one of our graduate students who took this at her ancestral home in Portugal. It's an absolutely beautiful frustose lichen. Does not appear that this is advancing. Let me quickly go over here. See if get this to work. I'll stay here. Now it is okay. Thank you. Okay, biology, just some background, and I don't want to get into the weeds too much, but stop if you do have questions along the way. But so what are lichens? What exactly are they? They are fungi, green algae, also cyanobacteria, which are ancient prokaryotic bacteria. And we view them primarily as mutualisms, but some folks will say that there's a little kleptobiology, that maybe the algae symbiont is stolen or sequestered and is sort of corralled into a lattice of fungus, and we'll look into that. And that they actually farm it, okay? The fungus farms the algae, but classically we think of them as a symbiosis, in particular mutualisms, because both are benefiting, okay? Generally though, the fungus dominates the biomass, quite so. It dominates the external structure, and we use the fungus to classify them. So for example, here we have a tree or an arboreal or a horticulous lichen, probably in the genus Flavocarmelia, a green shield, probably, maybe. But if you were to cross-section a little sliver of that and microtome it and stain it and look at it, you could get an illustration like this from the textbook I use in my class. You have this, so this would be air, this would be attached to, in this case, the bark, and you have fungal hyphae, kind of a layer on top. Within, in the middle section, you have these little green spheres or algae. This is kind of what they look like in a little more detail. And then you have, again, below, you have a layer of fungus and or of mycelium. And this is very sort of specialized in its structure with these little rhizines, these little structures that kind of adhere or attach to a surface. Okay. We call this the actual upper cortex in this case. This is the medulla, this sort of middle lattice. Is there farming going on in here? Maybe. And then below, you have the lower cortex. Okay. So a little bit more. This number is even higher now. This goes back about 6 years. I haven't seen a more recent figure, but about 13,500 known described species, and we call them lichenized fungi, mostly ascomycetes, not basidiomycetes, mushroom forming, amongst other sporocarps we call them. But ascomycetes are cup fungi. Does anybody know anything here know what's a common cup fungus? Any ideas? Some of them are delicious to eat. A morel. Morel, okay. Just nice, like little cup fungi. Truffles. Okay. Back to the photosynthesizing partner, which we call a photobiont. Again, most are green algae, and they're in the genus Trebucia. Then you see a micrograph here in the cross section. Here's that upper cortex. Here's that little medulla in the middle with different algal kind of layering there. And here's some individual cells, and this could come from that. I'm going to jump ahead. Folios lichen grown on that tree. Okay, that you would see there. Those that associate with cyanobacteria, most of those are in the genus Nostoc. And here's just some numbers for you. And you'll notice that most lichens are fungus plus green algae. Okay. All right. So where do they live? Where do they commonly reside? What sorts of habitats and niches within those? Generally places where plants grow, but maybe don't grow in high densities or not at all. Okay. So bare rock, very xeric or very dry, often hot, not always. Okay. Locations, bark and foliage of living plants. And let me go back actually here. What you're seeing here is another view. Victoria took this. Actually, here's the Atlantic Ocean looking southwest. And all that orange are crustose lichens growing on exposed rock above dunes. And this is in Portugal. It's a beautiful picture when you see the actual picture that hasn't been embedded here. They are found on every continent, including Antarctica. Okay. So they clearly have very important global contributions in terms of adding to biodiversity, and we'll look at services later. Okay, where else do they live? They love human structures, things we build and make and whatnot, often from rock, often from wood. We just saw those naturally, okay? So things like bricks, stone walls, tombstones, wooden fences, all sorts of things. I've seen them on telephone poles, which I think they soak in creosote or something like that, okay? Sam Herring was an undergrad who did a research project with me. This is Okahaki Preserve.
So,
If you
I
know,
taken the same picture.
you have taken the same picture. Do you walk dogs there?
No.
Because it's basically a dog run. It's pretty amazing. Yeah, but this fence is actually, I think, running kind of northeasterly. And Sam, I won't get into his study, was interested in, is there a difference in lichen vegetative growth of the thallus, we call it, and also production of reproductive structures, apothecia, being ascomycetes. And so this sort of, you can see this reddish color here. These are, does anyone know the common name of these? Can I see it again? British soldiers, very good. All right, Ariel. And he basically measured just their number and a number of other things to see if they differed in a more shaded versus a more sunny location. And he found no differences whatsoever, interestingly enough. So, okay, but they absolutely love human structures, including tombstones. Okay, I took this picture in England, South Central England. Those of you who may remember when Fairchild, we actually hiked on a Thanksgiving over there once. He was on sabbatical. And you'll notice there are lichens on these old tombstones. And that's a wonderful habitat with them. Pretty much, this is rock, and we have made tombstones from that. Just a little historical tie-in, or some people would call it ethno-lichenology, is that you can use lichens, and there's a whole kind of field of this, lichenometry, if you've heard of this, where if you know the radial growth rates of circular-ish or circular crustose lichens, those growing flat here, you can actually backdate possibly when this tombstone was formed. And think also too, how you can sleuth and do other things, like when might some other stone structure have been made. And so there's actually a book by this person named Montesquieu Lauper, Blood on My Lichen, an Easter Island History, which I have never been able to find it and buy it. But I did read a little blurb that there was an effort made to date the Easter Island stoneheads, with not necessarily the best results. But there have been avalanches caused by earthquakes in the Andes where lichenometry has been used to date the occurrence of the earthquake pretty accurately. It's pretty interesting because many saxicolous lichens are very, very long-lived, very long-lived. Okay, any questions? Okay, so they love to live in these sorts of locations. Whoops, back here. Okay, let's just look at the morphology a little bit. Lots of vocabulary. You know, biology has its own language, and every subdiscipline within biology has its own language, and it's all vocab and terminology rich. And so let's think about like these shapes again. So if I start just throwing these names out, you may know what I'm talking about a little better. But these are pictures I took. This is the Blue Ridge Mountains in Southwest Virginia, near Virginia Tech, actually. And you can see that here's a rock, and this appears to be kind of a wrinkly lichen. And this, yes, this letter C almost, it's the same as this roundish one. This yellow one, I think, is lichen. Pretty sure it is, but you get different colors and you get different sort of like morphoforms. So really quickly, crustose refers to crust like flatter, sometimes very, very thin leaves, okay? Folios are leaf-like, like this one. And so really quickly, the leaf-like types, folios, they can grow on below the leaves of a tree, okay? Or shrubs and whatnot, or they can grow on rocks. Okay, and this is, let me just make sure you saw this fruticose. I didn't mean to leave that out. Fruticose or shrub-like, and you can see some crustose folios, and then these little clusters here are not moss. These are lichens, and they're fruticose lichens. And this is actually from that same location in Virginia. This, however, this is the floor of a pitch pine forest in the New Jersey pine barrens. This is a turkey oak growing here. You see folios on their lichens are everywhere. But to find a large area covered up with ground, it's very sandy soil here with some dead organic matter, not a whole lot, not very deep. I have known people who call these actually ground lichen forests. So think, you know, little creatures, little people living there, but you can get extensive coverage of the ground by these types, fruticose. Okay. All right, ecosystem services, which clearly relates very, very essentially to sustainability, environmental, ecological. Why do I have this up here? Well, I refer to this book, but mainly these people. So, hey, you know, there's times in life when you're really sort of like something kind of clicks and you're like, wow, this is very interesting. I might want to pursue learning more about, in this case, lichens. So I went to grad school at Fordham University, which is across the street from the New York Botanical Garden. In fact, I TA'd ecology labs in the Botanical Garden. They have a forest there. It's pretty degraded, but it's still sort of functioning. And but the City University of New York, their grad center, they have programs there. And one of the most sort of, I would say, currently hot shots within lichen biology, some of you may have heard of him, is this person here, James Lindemer. He actually went to Penn undergrad. I think he's from Bucks County. He has Pennsylvania roots. And so he gave a talk with the Philadelphia Botanical Society. He is really fantastic. Now, his colleague here, Jessica Allen, yes, no, Jessalyn Allen, I haven't heard her speak, but she too was involved in this book. And then a current grad student, Jordan Hoffman, who's at the CUNY Grad Center. So I saw James Lindenberg speak about 5 years ago at the NYBG Botanical Garden, and it was one of those click moments. I really always liked lichens, but I just thought maybe I could start dabbling, with our heavy teaching load world we live in. A lot of service we have, but I thought, let me do this. And that was the sort of genesis. But to the point, he really talked about in that ecosystem services. And so I want to hit on a few very, very just broad, not deep, of these, starting with soil formation, okay? So primary succession, if you know ecological succession, primary, secondary is that which occurs, say, in the absence of any prior succession, like a rock face, a volcanic eruption, a lava area, that sort of thing, okay? And one of the first things that will come in and start growing on exposed rock, for example, are these lichens and folios. It's crustose. It is, and I just noticed it's reversed, but yeah, I could do that on purpose, but very, very, very good. Okay. I was quite honestly putting this together and I can't find my picture file where I have way too many pictures of lichens. So I'm relying on a smaller number, but those not cited are my own. Regardless, so how does this happen? And again, saxiplis comes from sax, which is Latin for rock. Okay, there's also terricolous, ground, porticulus, growing on trees. But anyhow, basically chemophysical, those processes that weather rocks. But how do lichens do it? Well, here's that sort of illustration again of a cross section of a thallus here. And this type actually here is crustose. The prior one was folios, but you do have an upper cortex, the medulla, and you have these little rhizine structures that adhere. And through just normal metabolic activities, you have leachates of acids, depsines, I think they're called, and then even carbonic acid, which can really affect, as it's somewhat water soluble, can get down and like limestone, calcium carbonate, and you can have weathering. Not only that, there are little micro fissures and cracks that these fungal hyphae from the lichen grow down into, and you have freeze thaw phenomena, and you get just breakdown. Lichens break down significant. Okay. Again, stop many questions. Okay. Another person that's big recently in the world of lichen ecosystem services, and in this case, the water cycle, is John Van Stan, who's at Georgia Southern University. This paper came out a few years ago in Nature Geoscience, and it really speaks to kind of an overlooked Rodney Dangerfield. You all do not know him probably. We get no respect, but hey, look at him up here in one of these multiply split trees, just covered in porticulus, like bark growing lichen. Come over here really quickly though, in this little schematic. I taught middle school for many years, and I love sometimes. This one's really legit and nicely kind of illustrated. This is from kidsfrontiers.org, but you have rainfall coming in on this illustrated tree. And we always think about, it hits the ground and then you get evapotranspiration, but roots take up a lot of that water, hold it, etc. But look at here, water stored in lichens and mosses is often ignored. We don't think about that, depending on the habitat. It can be significant. And I superly apologize. It's too small in here, but let me just take one moment and read this from this study conducted by these folks. Really quickly. Consequently, we find that the total evaporation of free water from the forest canopy and soil surface increases by 61% when non-vascular vegetation, including lichens, resulting in global rainfall interception flux that is 22% of terrestrial evapotranspiration. Now, this was based on some modeling. How accurate is that? But we know that interception and retention of water for a more, say, sustainable cycling is certainly, we are forgetting about the lichen contribution. Okay. All right, what else? This is kind of fun stuff, I think. I've seen some really interesting insects that do this in Fairmount Park in Philadelphia, up near Chestnut Hill. But in the realm of supporting biodiversity, okay, cover, such as say hiding underneath lichens, especially foliose lichens like these, and nesting by organisms, especially birds like gnatcatchers, and hummingbirds. Anybody seen a hummingbird nest? And did you notice lichens are often on them? Or maybe you didn't know those were lichens? Look again if you've seen them. And ultimately, this contributes to population regulation. It reduces predation, for example. It can actually help some predators, like insect predators. So I assume everyone sees on here the camouflage insect. Okay, very good. Let me just quickly show you, and you can find, I guess, this in the link. This, speaking of nesting material. And again, cumulatively, if you add up all the benefits that even this lichen-covered hummingbird nest it's a form of camouflage and probably even a little bit of insulation for that nest, but I think it's mainly protection. It's a very important contribution. Okay, all right. And we're not, this isn't a lichen biology class where we're getting into detail, but we also assist with lichen reproduction. The insects say that. I couldn't give them those little bubble things in time, but you get it. So how do they do that, do you think? We haven't talked about lichen reproduction. In short, they sexually reproduce and produce, most of them are ascomycete, cup fungi. They produce cup-like and other shaped, what we call ascocarps. Or they asexually reproduce little things called, don't worry about this, obviously, Acidia and Soredia. That one looks like little pinkies or thumbs sticking up out of the thallus of here, but they're very small, and others look like tumbleweeds. Well, they can break off from the mother thallus and attach to, say, this big fat caterpillar, and it drags it along. It might even like go to another branch or tree, and that little tumbleweed falls off. Fungus germinates, it's already got its algae inside. Boom. Okay. Really quickly, reproduction. Sexual reproduction by lichens ultimately produces spores, the equivalent of seeds in plants that are usually wind dispersed, water dispersed. But with lichens, when they do that, it's just the fungus alone, it's fungal spores. So they may land somewhere in a favorable habitat, germinate, but if they can't quickly find an algal partner, they generally wither, okay, and don't make it. So they need that, and this lends towards, okay, mutualism, but again, well, okay. Lastly, and this just kind of speaks for itself, Mina Turnen, and there's been a lot of work done in Scandinavia on lichens, including reindeer mosses, which are really lichens, and mixed down in here, these large reindeer, a large part of their diet is composed of lichens, different types of them, okay? And there, and I actually myself, I'm curious about, but I haven't read much about, say, contribution to their diet and other animals like that, like what percent. So again, this clearly is a major food source in boreal biomes and in tundra, kind of border areas where they go into that as well. And again, it's an important part of their diet, and these are dominant species in many food webs, not keystone, but dominant species. Okay. All right, moving along here. Human services. Let's now go into thinking of sustainability of healthy human systems. Let me pause actually and say I apologize. I meant to pass around. I actually got this from one of the little side parking lots on Rosedale, one of the houses up the street. And I was looking around there and I noticed I was in like ginkgo fruits and trying to break bark off one of the trees there, but that didn't work. Then I saw this. So I'll pass this around, starting like with Brad. And just look on here, there are a number of maybe 3 different species of foliose lichens. I'm going to start back here. These are apothecia, the reproductive structures of British soldiers. Those were collected by sand herring. And this is so heavy, I'm gonna leave it here. If anyone wants to come up later and see, those of you online, there's sort of a dusty, kind of powdery, possibly swamulose growth structure here of lichen on this rock. And I stole this from the outdoor classroom. There was like some kind of little rock structure. I'm gonna put it back. But there were some isopods that are not happy. Okay, let's come back to this. And by the way, pollution indicators. This rock, these specimens, not those. Were found right here on Westchester's campus. Would we say that this is an urban setting? Suburban, urban? I think so. Are there air pollutants here? What's the main source of air pollution here on campus?
Maybe cars.
Car exhaust, right? Does sulfur dioxide come out of car exhaust? Not much at all.
There's some
A little bit.
sulfur, nitrous oxide.
Nitrous oxide, surely. Okay, so nitrous oxide, nitrogen, eutrophication. These are common air pollutants in suburban urban areas. And by the way, coal-fired power plants, which were much more common in the past. I don't think our power comes from that here. Well,
It did,
it
until
used to
2014.
until 2014. So Limerick didn't power here, the nuclear power plant.
Well, we draw off the grid, so.
It's all mixed.
Yeah,
Regardless, so coal-fired plants, a lot of sulfur dioxide is given off. The sort of simple short end of it is it mixes with precipitates and it can kind of drift and land on vegetation, including lichens, and they may be sensitive, some species more, some others. So let's look at that a little bit here. And we can look at lichens in the landscape, urban to rural, and see if there's like impacts. And we know that this happens. So first of all, I've already mentioned this. So air pollution, again, sulfur dioxide being a classic example, down air lowers species diversity of lichens, and in particular, folios. They seem to be quite susceptible. And so a study done in Great Britain by Davies and others 22 years ago, I've been using this for a long time, found some interesting things. X-axis distance from Charing Cross. That's a train station in London. It's not the Harry Potter one. That's was over 500 points. It's not. I don't know. So there are no Harry Potter heads in here. Close. St. Pancras. St. Pancras. I'm pretty sure St. Pancras. Okay, anyway, just above
There
here.
was a movie that had Charing Cross in the title.
Really?
Yeah.
We'll have to look that up. Maybe I just lost those points, but I'm pretty sure. I did a summer at UCL, University College London, and the closest train station was Euston Station, and next one is St. Pancras. And I'm pretty sure that's where the,
Where it's found.
well, no, it's platform. Very good. I'm pretty sure. Okay. We'll take that. Regardless, back in the day, they're all electrified now. We see distance from, say, train station. And that basically means you're moving in a gradient from higher concentrations of air pollutants to lower, because those old trains would burn coal and whatever else, wood sometimes. Okay, why? Number of species, and these are foliose lichens. Now, we won't get into experimental design and like sample size, but 6 ash trees, not a very big, number, but regardless. And what we see here, this, looking at the correlation here, we see a positive correlation between number of species and distance from pollution source, or more polluted to less. So this was one little example, one little study, and many more have shown similar results, not from train stations, but simply from, say, city centers of places that used to have a lot of air particulate pollution. Okay. All right. Sensitivity by folio species and other, even crustose and whatnot, varies. And this is the subject of some research, not a whole lot, I don't think. And ultimately, you can look for, say, presence or absence of certain species. Let's say absence of pollution sensitive species infers pollution levels may be high there, and you're not even measuring that. Okay, so it's kind of like the canary in the coal mine thing. You don't see certain species. There's probably a lot of air pollution there. And so an example is the species here. But let me come back to that in a minute. ultimately what we can have. Okay, and I know this is a little bit of a stretch thinking of sustainability, but in urban areas, for more of a sociological, socioeconomic sustainability, the notion of food deserts. You can also have lichen deserts. And these may reflect green space deserts, lack of habitat, trees, shrubs. Also just environmental conditions may be extremely hot in certain places, right? But ultimately, at the end of the day, where you do have trees, you may end up not having like this species here, like Anora conisioides. Okay. What you will have though often is you'll go, wow, there's lots of lichens here. But if you look closely, it's maybe the same species or a couple that are, think about plants that do fantastic in urban settings. Atlanthus, what's a native that does well? Sycamores. Okay. So there are some species of lichen that do okay. Okay. But at the end of the day, we can actually use lichens, and there are people that do this. There are even geographers who have mapped looking at air pollution patterns and linking at, let's say, lichen species richness. Questions?
Are lichens found throughout the world universally, or are there some that are like endemic, I guess, only found in North America? Are they seem to be spreading like exotic species with increased travel? And is that causing any problems and stuff?
So that's a very good question, John. And the answer to that is a little fuzzy, but I would say definitely there are endemics on all the continents. There are lichens that tend to be, say, localized, or they have broad ranging distributions within, say, continent. But there has definitely been human assisted movement. And in fact, this species here, this is actually doing very poorly in parts of Western Europe. Although it's coming back now because air pollution rates are falling, but it fell out because of coal burning, not even for power plants, just for warmth and whatnot. And so in the Netherlands, for example, this was very common in Amsterdam and Rotterdam on city trees, and it's basically disappeared. Okay, but it has been brought here, and it's actually found in North America. Also too, when I said fuzzy, this is the case too with lots of basidiomycete, mushroom bearing, bolete bearing fungi, that they produce spores, and some of those can drift really far. And so it's like there's a question of our dandelions plant. Were they introduced into North America? Were they?
Yeah, I heard they were.
I think they were. Did anybody have a different take? But there's some evidence to suggest, kind of like the Vikings who ended up in Newfoundland, Canada, just barely made it, maybe, that there are some possible, that there was drift of dandelion seeds, I'm not sure. Anyway, back to lichens. So generally endemic, wide distributions, however, they've been introduced all over the place. Okay. All right, a last human service, kind of in the realm again of like thinking of sustainability, human health, and this ties again into like notions. We seem to focus on urban, less so on rural, but most of the data is done in cities. And there was a study done by these two folks. It was published a long time ago when I was in grad school, actually. Not that I read it then, but in Nature, a very good study that I've read since then. And what this was done in Venice, Italy, in the region Veneto. And I think Venice itself was like here, down here, possibly here. But it's in the region of northeastern Italy. And what you see are just these sort of governmental areas, and then within them, think townships in Pennsylvania kind of thing, sort of broken down. And the study looked at lichen diversity, numbers of species. And the gradient is the greener, the more species, the redder, the fewer. So lichen desert, not. And then lung cancer mortality just in males, young males, same thing. The greater the mortality, the redder. And you can just look at this nice just squint and you see almost an exact match. Where you have lichen desert, you have higher incidences of lung cancer. The notion of air pollution, there's almost definitely an environmental, probably an environmental factor contributing to that cancer rate. Okay. Thought this was very interesting. Now, question is, do people really use lichen indicators? I mean, are we really looking at this very much? I haven't dug into like public health data. I don't think so, is my feeling, but at least it does lend more evidence to the connection between human environments and the notion of, say, healthier ecosystems. You're getting this, well, you got this too. And this can add sort of weight to, we need to like have more green here and we'll have less red there. Does that make sense? Okay. So, yeah. And let me just pause and say, there is sort of an area of public health. I don't know the field that well. We have programs here. I have a friend, she's a medical geographer, health geographer at Lehman College at CUNY in New York, and she studies asthma, the geospatial dynamics of asthma. And I guarantee if you looked at asthma here, it would look the same. And we've talked ecology stuff before. And she has more or less said, yeah, we don't really think of that very much. They just think of air pollution. So there could be better tie-in. All right, moving along here. And let me wrap this up. Boy, is this busy. I stole this poster. No, I did not. This was actually a poster that April, again, I'm very proud of April. Born and raised in Westchester Borough, well, right around here. Went to high school at Henderson. Went to undergrad here. Worked at Charles River Labs as a bench jockey for many years, and came back to get her master's here and said, I want to live somewhere else. So she did her master's here, and I helped her as much as I could. She got into UNLV. She's getting her PhD there, working with extremophile plants. And guess where she's doing her research though? Not at Burning Man area. Hawaii. From Westchester to Hawaii, she made it. But she, first of all, spent a little time in the New Jersey Pine Barrens. So I just want to talk briefly about this. We're almost out of time. The very big picture here, we went out and walked. I really love, how many of you have been to Brandenburg State Forest? Nobody? Okay, I can share this information. I'm actually, in a few weeks in later March, I'm going to lead a little walkthrough on Saturday. It's totally an informal walk and talk with some students and some friends in the area, and you're welcome to come. Okay, we go to Packham Pond, there are carnivorous plants there, and then we'll go and just see a lot of those ground lichen forests I told you about. What's even nicer is nearby, and I always get the names screwed up, is at Horton State Forest. You have white sand, like sort of dunes. This was the ocean floor with twisted and gnarled pitch pines, and you feel like you're going to see. You all know him, maybe Star Trek Captain. What's his name?
John Kirk.
Oh, Captain Kirk, the old original one.
Yeah. Kirk.
William Shatner. We're going to see him walk out because it's a setting for Star Trek. It's otherworldly is the point here. But the ground is covered in cladonia, in particular subtenuous or Dixie reindeer moss. Talk about a bad common name in more than one way. Anyway, okay, you got it. It's not a moss. It's not a moss. All right. She basically, we went out and walked it. She noticed that there is succession occurring of shrubs, berry type plants like Iolacea, and pitch pines themselves. But ultimately, she noticed that there was this ground moss growing under the shrubs. And she seemed to think it was sort of thinner than that in the oak. And one might say, that makes sense. Photosynthesizing organisms. Okay. But she decided to address the question, is indeed let's say there are differences in the lichen growing under a shrub, where we could call it shrub encroachment, and what's happening to the lichen. So she basically just looked at some bread and butter morphological. We didn't have any money to do this, so we kept it cheap. And actually, John Pashota was a good contributor, and hopefully the paper will come eventually. But she looked at dry mass of the phalli, just the actual, this stuff here, the vegetative part of the lichen. And then she also looked at the numbers. She counted the numbers of apothecia per unit area to see if there were differences. And she hypothesized dry mass would be greater in the open because you'd have more photosynthesis, for example, more growth. And indeed, this was significantly different. You can't see that here. She also found that apothecial density was significantly greater, but the reverse under the shrub. And her take, there's no literature that's looked at this that we could find to support or to corroborate or to like contradict that there's this whole notion of you reproduce like more when you're possibly, you know, losing out for as long as you can to increase reproductive output. So there was that. She also looked at chlorophylls A and B, which are markers of, say, basically photosynthetic activity, producing photosynthase by the algae. And she found that they were significantly greater also under the shade lichens versus those in the open, which is actually, then she found out, and John, help me if I'm going to speak here, that chlorophyll B in particular tends to be more heavily concentrated in shaded algae and plants. So I think she did a good job here. It's pretty interesting. And she presented this at the Northeast Naturalist Conference that year in Albany, New York. Okay, any questions about her work? And this is in press. I don't know how much longer, but we'll see. Last but not least, what do I intend to do? Finally, maybe in the next year, I'm going to be able to do some research again. I've been doing a lot of heavy service work, but these are three things. First of all, again, not very expensive work, but field work. Looking at ground lichen community structure, like species richness, evenness, those sorts of common metrics to say this is possibly a more robust community than this one. On pitch pines and oak dominated stands at the pine barren. So two different types of habitats. Might you have a more, say, speciose community in one versus the other, which has management possible if you include lichens in management. That's another thing I'd like to argue, that lichens should be considered when you think of biodiversity and conservation management. Particulus lichens that grow on tree bark in response to burn history. The New Jersey pine barrens are burned in the state forest, prescribed burning, and I've noticed charring of bark of different levels of intensity. And I'm just curious how maybe those tree bark growing lichens, richness, and then their abundance possibly, or cover of area are doing. Lastly, abundance of Senococcum jophilum. This is an ascomycete fungus on the pitch pine hosts. And actually they're on their roots in response to burning intensity. I would like to couple these together. Very easy, very simple. You just do some soil coring. But wait, is this a lichen? Here's a nice micrograph down here in the cross section. And these little dichotomously branched things, those are not lichens. Does anybody know what those are? You have roots covered in this, they're the most brilliant, shiny, charcoal black structures you have ever seen. We've never seen sexual reproductive structures on these. So this is actually a mycorrhizal fungus. And I do that research as well. That was my doctoral work. And I'd like to get back to this, but 2 studies in one. And these are known as disturbance happy mycorrhizal fungal species. So they tend to do really well in highly like tilled soil, burned soil, and so forth. But we don't have a good handle on, say, their colonization rates and abundances and all that. All right. So I'm going to leave you this here again. I miss April. She was a fantastic student. And this is like 40 miles east of Camden. Not even that, maybe like 35 miles. It's near New Lisbon. If you have not been to the Pine Barrens, you're living near one of the most unpopulated, but surrounded by humanity, and amazing places. Get out there. Okay. I will leave you with this, if you can read that. You all are nice. When I showed this in mycology, this slide. I'll get sort of the, yeah,
I
not much.
doubt they even read it.
And I busted I actually, my PhD advisor who studies mycorrhizae, I actually got this from him. And he does not like to be corrected ever. But it's actually alga is singular. And he would say, later the algae told the fungus, and I'm like, wow, the fungus had multiple names, whatever, but you get it. All right, so thank you all very much. There's any questions now from anyone, I'll be happy to take them. Okay, Ariel, didn't work, okay.
I do have two thoughts actually. So my first thought was,
Okay, comments, good,
Yeah.
love it.
I know I see a lot of moss grow on roofs, and it's always a question of whether they have a big impact on the quality of the roof. But I don't like them, like,
What, the quality of the roof?
or just like if they break down the roof.
The integrity of the roof,
Really-
okay, like they might cause it to age quickly or
Yeah.
something, okay, I gotcha.
So do lichen grow on roofs?
That's, I like that question, I like that. I know in England, I have seen where there's thatched roofs, I've not seen lichens on thatched roofs there, but there are some slate, and I know we have those here, I should look more, but I can't say with 100% certainty, but I think I've seen lichens on slate roofs. Okay,
Maybe
in a shadier side, even though many lichens can tolerate very high temperatures, baking in the sun, probably need to toast them. Okay.
it makes me think of green roofs, that's a big system. I
That's-
wonder if that could be the time.
That's kind of interesting because that if you have a slate roof that's peaked, you generally can't grow things on it that require soil, obviously, but maybe bryophytes and lichens could, which water retention
Yeah, that's.
benefits, but that might also not be good for the integrity of the roof. You don't generally want roofs to stay wet
Yeah.
unless it's a flat roof with, it's been made into a green roof.
Oh, yeah, and I did wanna ask, I know there's a lot of serpentine barrens around here, is there like the special, lichen that grows in it?
That's a really good question too. I don't know if anyone in here does know, but there are often, can be exposed rock and serpentine barrens. But you often get that sort of heavy metal laden soil. There
I'm
are
trying to picture it, I'm not picturing.
Yeah, cause I
Not
know there's a lot of
really
interesting.
looked.
the ones I've been to, I can't say that I haven't looked for lichens, but, and they're often they are more, say, meadow like those that haven't been encroached upon, and that are being sort of invaded by briar and some woody plants like sassafras and things. Jessica Shettlebauer, in the department, I'll have to ask her, because she spent a lot of time in the place. So, where would you know? You've been to the.
No, the one at the Gordon, I could never distinguish it from anything around it. I worked in serpentine habitat in California and was totally not aware of lichens and
Right, I was there, I was at Goat Hill, which is in Florida. And we took a guided tour of this serpentine barren, and, we were told about all the interesting unique animals and plants, but I didn't really know about lichen at that point. So I
So-
wonder if there's any sort of unique lichen that can grow into.
You piqued an interest in me that I would like to find out a little more. There's a Chester County Park person, I forget his name, at Nottingham County Park. I'm gonna ask him, but I bet he's gonna say, I don't know, because,
Roger Latham might know.
okay,
He did the management plan for Pink Hill and has worked at the Nottingham. Barrens a lot.
so then email him and ask him.
if they really want to be called extremophiles, they should be able to live in serpentine barren.
Well, that is true, and maybe some ground lichens, but I was at Nottingham back in the summer, and I think I would have noticed ground lichens, and I can't recall that I did. But a lot of the Barrens areas I've been to, there are disturbed and are being encroached upon by a lot of vegetation.
There's a lot of serpentine exposure at the ground level, and I'm just trying to remember, and I think it's just rock, there would be little lichens that I wouldn't have noticed, but.
There could be some. I usually get down there about once every 2 years. I don't get to go to natural areas at all. I used to walk. I used to go to the park all the time. I don't know,
Well, Goat Hill is beautiful. It's really beautiful meadow, but we are working on the store. But I wonder if there's stuff in there.
I'm gonna look. There's good questions and comments, Ariel. Thank you. Nora, did you have a question or two?
Yeah, so yours and April's research, the dry mass production was lower in the shade like you would expect, but
Dry mass production is higher in the open
yeah.
area.
But photosynthetic production was much higher in the shade, so where did it go to if not to make biomass? Was it just the increased application?
Well, can't say for sure. I can only speculate because we didn't directly, we didn't tie the two together. That would be a whole other study, but that's a good question to bring up. Yeah, in other words, but by the way, chlorophyll B production tends to be much lower than chlorophyll A anyway, say per unit area of algae. But if you go by chlorophyll A, yeah, you would think it's got more sugars here to do things with. So I can only speculate. Apothecial density was quite a bit higher. The darker bar, and I know you can't even see this here, is the shaded, that's the unshaded, was much higher. And so one could possibly speculate that, yeah, and apothecia are expensive things to make. So they're actually kind of viewed as fungal tissues, which fungi don't generally tend to have really highly specialized hyphal structures that are called tissues. But sporocarps definitely are. So they're expensive to make metabolically, and they also have to produce spores and so forth. So that could have been, yeah. Another possibility could be though that, and April read the literature, that photosynthetic efficiency was just simply higher under the shrubs than in the open. But although this species, it's a ground lichen, it grows, but it does grow in open and in shaded sites where we know there is no encroachment by shrubs. It grows under, for example, turkey oaks. We didn't look at that. But it could be possible that growth in the open is actually suppressed because of high UV exposure, and lichens are sensitive to UV exposure. In fact, they produce a lot of phenol compounds in the upper cortex to sort of shield that. Some of them are acids like volcanic acid. So actually volcanic acid really quickly is highly concentrated in a sun-exposed lichen, fruticose in the Pacific Northwest called wolf lichen. And the indigenous peoples there knew to collect it, not boil it, but kind of put it in some warm water and extract the whatever is coming out. And they would then soak meat in that and lay it around in areas where wolves had been coming around. Hence the term wolf lichen. They would eat it and it was toxic, it would kill them. So yeah.
Well,
That's in the realm of ethno-lichenology.
we're past 1 o'clock, so if you can continue with the conversation, thank you, but we probably ought to let those who are logged on to Zoom and anyone here who has a class or something they need to get to, head for that right now. But before we stop the recording, please join me in thanking.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity.
You had a question?
I had a question about apples.
Walt, really quick, speaking of UV light,